sometimes you go back. Well, I love the first draft, always my favorite draft, because you can write anything you want, and it's just like complete magic happens. Like I'll give you, for instance, there's a dog in this book, and I had not the
This
dog
would be in the Anecdote, which released here May 5th.
the antidote, the antidote, exactly. It's a middle grade medical fantasy, and so there's a dog in it. And my dog was here with me, but it was a different dog that I was thinking of when I wrote the dog character. Who our dog, we have these big Newfoundlands, and they have all this fur and their scruff, and they love water because they're water dogs, and they'd like to put their head in their water bowls. So a lot of times their scruff is very wet, and this particular Newfoundland, one Newfoundland ago named Edward, he always had a wet scruff, and we just couldn't get him dry. Our other one, Albert, who was our last Newfoundland, he didn't have this problem. So it's just, I don't know why it was, but Edward's scruff was always wet, and it never smelled very good. We just could not get it dry and pleasant smelling. And he had bad breath. And so he was this gorgeous ball of black fluff, and people would come up to him and they'd want to just put their arms around him and give him a hug. And then as they would come toward his face, they would draw back and they'd say, "Ooh, ooh, it's a little fragrant." And so I used that for the dog in the book. And so that part I had sort of planned out. But there's a wonderful thing, as you probably know, when you're writing and you're just writing away, and suddenly, who knows what part of your brain takes over. But that bad breath it ended up making a little turn in the story. And I never really intended for that to happen, but that's one of those things that kind of magically happens when you're writing. There's a girl in the book, Penelope. She's the friend of the protagonist, and I intended for Penelope to exist. But then as I'm writing her, magically, suddenly she has blue hair. I had not planned that. I don't know where that blue hair came from. And then she kind of wrote this backstory for herself, and it turned out to be a very sad backstory. I would have created something like that for her, but that's what happened in that wonderful first magical draft. I love writing the first draft. But then what I don't like so much is then you have to go back and read it after it's all done, and it just was this wonderful creation. You're so proud, and you go back and read it and you realize the magic doesn't work, and it's full of plot holes, and you have to fix it all. Or maybe the antidote was too long, and I actually had to cut out the book has diseases sort of woven through it, and I had to cut out some of the diseases, which is very sad. And so the second draft, I don't care for that draft very much.
I have a friend who has no ambition to publish. She just writes first drafts of whatever she wants to write.
Perfect.
And then she puts them on her computer. They're just for her, and she just has that joy and the happiness. I find a lot of joy and happiness in revising and polishing as well, but there's nothing like that first draft where everything's coming to you. Do you have a theory as to where some of that stuff comes from? Is that the subconscious working out your problems while you're doing other stuff? Or is there a muse that's somewhere in the writing room talking to you?
This is such an excellent question. It's such an excellent question. I also write cozy murder mysteries, and this happens for that so much. The cozy murder mysteries are older ladies, the Fog ladies, who all live together in an elegant apartment building in San Francisco. But each of them has their own character, and darned if when you're writing, who knows, they must take over and just go for it, and say, this is how I would have lived this scene, because things happen. You don't even sometimes remember writing it. You don't really remember writing it, or you're writing it and you're thinking, there's no way this can really happen. Like one of the ladies ends up on life support in the ICU, and even as I was typing it, I was thinking, this didn't really happen, because how am I going to get her off this? So I do have no idea where it comes from, but it is remarkably wonderful and predictable in that first draft.
A lot of this, a lot of writing is very practical, point A to point B. But I've talked before, so I won't talk again about how Banneker Bones wrecked my original plan for the first book. They were supposed to off the alligator people, and he decided he wanted to be a very different sort of character than what I had envisioned, and there it was. And those moments are about as close as I've ever been to having a true spiritual experience where there's something beyond me, and it could just be my subconscious, and these are the tricks it needs to play to get the words on the page. And if so, well played, subconscious. It's it's working.
It is so true. And where it comes from, who knows? And for me also, so there's that when I'm typing on the computer, but then if I get to a sticky point, I will go out for a run. That's how I work it out. And you're running along. I live near a lake, so I'm looking out at the lake, but then boing, somewhere in the middle of all that, into your head pops the solution. And, actually, the same thing would happen to me as a doctor. Sometimes you have a patient that you're struggling with, and you think there's something here that I'm missing, or there's something we haven't considered yet. And oftentimes it would come to me in the middle of the night. In fact, I keep a pad of paper next to my bed because the answer would come in the middle of the night, and then I'd have to telephone the patient the next day and say, I thought of something else. Let's look at this possibility. And so where does that come from? Who knows? It's probably our brain is resting. And when it's resting, it's got the ability to then bring in these other parts that were always there, but who knows?
I've heard other writers tell me about the notebook that they keep beside their. I don't, because I figure if it's a good enough idea, I'll remember it in the morning. And I probably have forgotten many brilliant ideas. But that's always kind of been my theory, that if I write something down, it will just sit there and be a note. Whereas if I let it compete Hunger Games style with other ideas in my head, eventually the one that it's most suited for me that I really want to write will step forward. But when I hear that, it's usually to preserve writing. And big fan of that on this show. I think that's important. But you're doing it, and there's literally could be a life and death matter. Somebody's on the line.
It has happened several times. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That might be the best argument I've ever heard for why everyone should be writing a little bit. Because look how I'm assuming that's a skill that's carrying over and helping you. Are there other skills that transfer between your work as a doctor and your work as a writer?
Oh,
or are those two separate
nope.
sides of your brain?
Absolutely, 100%. So, for instance, as a doctor, one of your main roles is to listen. And we have a phrase at work: listen to learn, listen to understand. But that's exactly what we do with our characters, what we're speaking about here, what you did with yours. You have to listen to your characters, because if you miss that when they say, nope, I have blue hair now and I have a very sad backstory, you're going to have missed it. And so listen to understand would be an excellent example of something that's in both places. Another thing is I teach residents at work. And one of my favorite parts about I work in a training hospital, so we have medical residents, and I love the teaching part. But I tell my kids, I have 2 kids, I tell them and I tell the residents that for life, one of the most important things is showing up every day on time with a smile on your face and enthusiasm. And so that's something also for writing, which is huge. Just sitting in the chair every day and doing it. And I think it applies to all of life, not just to writing, not just to doctoring, but to everything.